I'm so excited to have Bonnie Hammer on the podcast. She has a new book out, 15 Lies Women Are Told at Work and the Truth We Need to Succeed. Bonnie, I should tell you, we have a very large audience of professional women who I think would find this guidebook very helpful. Frankly, as a man, I found your advice extremely helpful because I think I know you're gearing it towards women at work, but I feel like some of the lessons and some of the mantras that you try to reframe are useful for everybody.
Oh, they are for sure. As you know, in publishing, publishers like you to basically focus a book so they can market it in a certain way. But in my mind, it is for anyone and everyone because it's basically the uncommon sense that you really need to navigate work or life, frankly. And what I appreciate is that so many of the guys have been saying they're passing it along to their sons. So I love it.
Yeah, you take on some mantras that, sometimes go without challenge. Don't sweat the small stuff. Trust your gut. You can have it all. Follow your dreams. And I think you used the word bullshit to describe them, some of them.
Well,
Bonnie.
In truth, I wanted to call the book, I Call Bullshit. But again, they weren't too happy with that. They thought it would kind of limit the audience that it would reach. But that was my choice. And there is a lot of BS in what we've been told and what we've been brought up to believe that I think is really harmful. And for women, especially those of childbearing age, when people are told they could have it all, from my point of view, the only time you can have it all is on a bagel. But it's all about balance. Nobody tells you that no matter what you do, you're going to feel guilty and off balance, that when you're at work, you're going to be worried about the kids and family at home. When you're on vacation, you're letting your colleagues down. I'm an empty nester. And even now I feel guilty when I leave my dogs home. So having it all is... It's a very tough thing for people, especially women, to buy into because you can't, because your all, my all, everybody's all is different. And you have to define what's important to you. And even then you have to prioritize and say, that's okay. That is what's going to make me happy, at least for now. And then those priorities are going to change, and that's okay. But you're never going to have it all, especially at once. And if you do have it, it's way in hindsight when you add it up, when you get to my age and say, ooh, I've been pretty lucky.
What have you noticed? I mean, you spent 40 plus years in this business.
Don't date me.
I'm quoting the book, Bonnie. I'm just going with what you wrote in the book.
Okay.
What have you seen? What's improved for women in the workplace? What hasn't changed? And frankly, have certain things gotten worse?
Moshe, a lot of things have changed. First and foremost, at least there are more of us, more women in the workplace, more women who are succeeding to a certain degree. And therefore, there's more room at the table because of it. What hasn't changed enough, in my opinion, because for so long, women had to be so negatively competitive because there used to be only one seat at that table. We don't bring enough women up along with us. And I'm not convinced that's changed yet in the business to the degree that I would like it to change. I'm a big believer.
Yeah, that's something Katie Kirk wrote about that in her autobiography.
But it's true. It's women somehow they feel that if they're succeeding, it's almost too dangerous to bring up some other people to the right and the left of you because they may get that seat. But there are a lot of seats now. And I'm a huge believer in collaboration and teams. And the more of us that get to the C-suites, the easier it's going to be for other women. So let's bring them up with us. Don't be so threatened or insecure that you think somebody else is going to get your spot. There's more than one. So that hasn't changed enough yet. It's gotten better, but it's still imperfect.
We had another member of the NBC family who put out a book last year, Julia Borston of CNBC,
Love Julia.
On this podcast. And she wrote a phenomenal book, I think, When Women Lead, it's called, on women CEOs and how, she went to the data on how it benefits the company's bottom line, given some of the unique characteristics women have in leadership. And you in the book write about how being a woman in a man's corporate world was a superpower.
Yes.
Explain that.
Women sometimes feel that what is natural, I mean, in terms of science, women have more oxytocin than guys do. Oxytocin basically is responsible for caregiving, empathy, for certain things that women embody naturally because we are caregivers. We have kids, therefore somehow whoever created us created this extra dose of oxytocin in our system. And we are, because of that, our empathy, our caregiving, our collaboration, all that stuff, if we use it well, leads to great leaders. But unfortunately, too many women believe that being too empathetic, too caring, if they come off too nice, too supportive, it's going to look like a weakness. And it's not. It's a fabulous strength. And when you look at the companies that really have succeeded out there, I'm sure Julia had the very specific stats in her book. Women-led companies, first of all, create a tremendous amount of loyalty. People stay for a very long time, and they're hugely successful. So the loyalty factor, the empathy factor, the collaboration factor, I think are huge pluses, and we should embrace it rather than think it's a weakness.
Yeah, you had a bunch of C's. You had caretaking, you had collaboration, you had communication.
Yes.
How you uniquely communicate.
We do. And I think it's because we see, we have an ability, whether it started as a weakness or a strength, to read people, to kind of watch them, see their faces, see their expressions. You get a lot out of reading a face, how somebody's relating to you. So I think that's really important. But we're also good listeners. And part of it may come from a little bit of fear of not wanting to speak before we know exactly how we want to react to something. But women, for the most part, at least so research says, are better listeners. When you put the listening, the empathy, the ability to read a face, to read a room, that contributes to success.
And you mentioned another C, crying, in the book.
Yes, I do. So this is interesting. Women are afraid to show emotion. And I think it's really important. If you feel let down or if something's going on, it's okay to cry, but not in the office with your boss, not necessarily right in front of your colleagues. That's what they make bathroom stalls for. Or just kind of take a deep breath, live with it for a bit, and then go home and let it out. Because you need to release it. You need to feel it. We shouldn't deny what we're feeling. That's another issue. People feel they have to be tough and strong and never feel an emotion. It's important to feel it and to express it in a healthy way. Just do it in the right place.
We've been watching an evolution in the workplace. I think they describe us as elder millennials or geriatric millennials, those of us born in the early 80s. And our,
you're so old. You're so old. I can't stand it.
But we're seeing different generational trends,
millennials.
right?
I love that term.
I know. Can you believe the geriatric term there?
No.
And so, we had the Gen Xers, we got the millennials. Now Gen Z is coming to the workforce, yes. And we're seeing certain trend lines around that. Also, and what triggered that question is what you just said, talking about being very open about your emotions and your feelings, etc. But you also, at times in the book, especially when it comes to working for a challenging boss, it's you talk about reframing that in your mind. That sometimes what's really happening here is mentoring. Explain the complexity of that, especially as we kind of talk about this kind of more touchy-feely workplace right. That's been created in the recent years.
It's a great topic, and it's very, very complicated for a variety of reasons. I'm a big believer in mentors, and I think there are a couple of kinds of mentors. One is the one I think everybody assumes they want. They're the cheerleaders, they pat you on the back, they tell you how great they are. They're basically friends that a little bit, above you or to the side of you, whatever. And they're great to have. No one's saying you shouldn't have a supportive mentor. But the mentors that really get you the furthest in life, at least as I believe, are what I call challenging mentors. And they are the drill sergeants of your life. They are the people who put tough into tough love. And sometimes that can be pretty damn tough. But they're the ones who tell you the truth. They're the truth tellers. They're going to tell you when you're not living up to your capability or your capacity. They're going to tell you if you handed in something that really isn't up to snuff. They're going to be very honest about what you're doing, what you're capable of, and maybe sometimes what you're not. The problem is that we have been brought up in a culture that, and especially now, where hard news, harsh news, saying something that's even slightly critical seems to be judged and viewed as dangerous as opposed to useful.
Yeah.
And there's a ginormous difference between a challenging mentor and someone that's an abusive boss or abusive person. But with HR getting so strong in so many companies, in a lot of ways, fantastic that HR departments are much more sensitized and much more active. In another way, it gives people an opportunity to run away from dealing with one-on-one reactions to stuff in an honest, direct way that's going to help them grow. Instead of talking to someone saying, explain that to me. I mean, that sounds pretty tough or rough. Why did you say that? And you can do it in a very nice way, but you can have that conversation. Lately, it's too easy to run to HR and say someone was really nasty, they were negative, they were abusive. And I think it's hurting the younger generation who are trying to navigate the world. The world isn't that way. The world is kind of tough. Listen, learn to hear, and then try to figure out and filter what's someone saying to you that's really useful to you rather than a real issue or problem or abusive. It's a huge spectrum of stuff in there. And I would say 85% of the time, it's someone actually trying to help you. They may not do it in the right way. They may sound a little harsher than they should, but more often than not, it's useful information that you can learn and grow if you're willing to hear it and feel just a wee bit uncomfortable.
So we don't have time to go through all 15 lies.
No.
And we should also...
No. Oh, come on now.
Let folks actually read the book, but I do want to go through a couple of them.
Go for it.
And I'm going to start with number one, follow your dreams. You call that nightmare advice, that you should do the opposite of following your dreams. Talk to me about that.
Well, as you put it, sometimes if you follow your dreams, you're going to be sleepwalking through life, because when and how did we come to our dreams? When we were very, very young. Our parents whispered something in our ear. Our school teachers said something, a favorite course, maybe at least in college. But it's at a very young stage in our life when we don't actually know or understand what we want to do, what we want to be, or even what's out there. My line, I think, in the book is, you can't be what you can't see, and you can't dream what you don't know. So when you're young, it's limiting so many opportunities. And even if you do follow your dreams these days, so many of those dreams, by the time you get there, are gone. When you think about all of the restructures in companies, businesses being obsolete, jobs, if you remember a number of years ago, you have to be a programmer, you have to be a coder. Now they're saying, oh my God, you were following that dream. AI's taking over. There are no more jobs like that. So I think oftentimes we're very young when dreams get planted in our head, and we continue to follow or try to follow it when in fact it's not how we want to live our life. I did that in photography. I was passionate as hell to become a photographer. Planted the seed when I was 12. Had a little granny camera, summer camp, followed my friends around, took photographs, and then sent photos to everyone, black and white, had to get the film developed. And then I would stick them on my wall like an early Instagram. But I found that every time I took a job in photography post-college, I hated the actual job. I was in the darkroom. My manicures were terrible. My fingers turned yellow. Then those were the days we, developed photography in chemicals. Then I was a photo editor. I loved the title editor, but I was taking other people's photographs, putting them next to other people's words. Boring. And then I was a freelance, meaning I was not paid photographer on a kids' TV show where I was running around following kids and a dog on a show called Infinity Factory. And one day, basically, they fired a couple of production assistants. I just happened to be there. They asked if I wanted a job as a PA. I needed a job. I was about to get finished with a graduate program, took it, and that's where my real dream began, working on a set of a TV show. Even though I was picking up dog crap because I was youngest PA working on a show, and I got the dog as my cast member to follow.
And you've translated that to an extremely successful TV career. You talk, what I like about the book is you go through each of the lies, you give advice, you write it like a TV executive, like the rest of us communicate, like short, punchy, bullet points. It's really a great guidebook. And you go through your career path. And what was interesting, you talk about your time at the WWE in wrestling. And it's as you're talking about imposter syndrome. And you acknowledge there, and I thought this is an extremely courageous thing to do, and I'd love to hear how you came to decide you were going to do it, where you acknowledge to them you're in the WWE, and you're like, you acknowledge how little of it you've ever experienced, watched, how little you know about it. You said, I've been watching for a couple of weeks. And I think many of us would come in and the assumption is like, pretend you know what you're talking about. Pretend and you went with full transparency there.
I was sure I would be found out if I lied at all. I had never watched a wrestling match either in person or on TV in my life. It was given to me by my boss at the time, Rod Perth, because the other guys who had literally overseen it for USA, they weren't into storylines. They were into the macho part of it. So when they gave it to me, I almost quit. My husband talked me, basically off the cliff and said, try it. You can quit in a month, in 3 months, go in. And
why'd they give it to you? Why'd Rod give it to you?
I think because he knew I could help them with the storyline that they were trying to create and not being able to do it, to get it out of just the physicality of wrestling and, just matches inside of a ring and the women as arm candy. And he thought that we had one chance to see if we can help resurrect it to bring more of a broad audience rather than just guys onto USA at the time. I think you used the term male soap opera. You approached it as a male soap opera. That's exactly right. Yeah. What we did was we changed the women, aside from being arm candy on the guys, we turned them into characters. And Vince was really wonderful at the time. He really listened because when I went in there, I was brutally honest. I told him I'd never watched the show in my life. I probably wouldn't have taken this assignment, but it was forced on me, that I don't know anything about his business, only that he makes his money at the gate, not necessarily on television, but I could help him make a better television show and help him create characters. All he said to me was, thanks for being honest, let's go. And my relationship with them, probably 20 plus years later, I can still say it was some of the most fun I ever had. And that was one of those, not quite follow the opportunity, but it was an opportunity that I was forced to take on. But it was a great experience.
Because it speaks to, you talk about the one of the mantras you talk about that you call BS on is fake it till you make it. And so effectively here, you're like, I'm not going to fake it till I make it. I'm going to be totally honest with you. You feel like that works in most scenarios, that advice, like acknowledging, because I just feel like in an office setting, the last thing you want to do is admit to your bosses that, you don't know exactly that you're not, you don't have depth on a subject.
No, I completely feel that the minute you start faking anything, you will lose it. The minute you are caught in a lie, you're going to lose trust. The minute somebody loses trust, the ability to buy that back, get that back, is virtually impossible. But what I believe the most important piece is that people want people around them who want to learn, who aren't afraid to ask questions. And what people don't realize is the minute you ask somebody for help to explain something, you can do it in a way that you don't sound like a moron. You basically say, I'm not quite sure I understand that fully. Would you be willing to spend 10 minutes with me so I can understand what you need me to do better? The minute you do that, you empower somebody else to take you on, to kind of be, in a sense, a mentor to you or to help you at that moment. And then all of a sudden, they also know that if they give you anything to do and you say you can do it, because at some point in your career or with them, you said, I don't really understand that. Can you help? They're going to believe you can do it. So if they're going to put you up for a promotion and at this point you say, oh, I can definitely do that job, may need a little bit of learning, but I know I can do it, because somewhere else in your relationship with them, you said you weren't quite sure, they're going to buy it instantly. It's all about trust. And everybody, there's no one who has escaped feeling like an imposter at some point in their life. So they're going to appreciate when you're coming to them and saying, you know, I'm not quite sure I understand. I've never done this before. I know I can do it, but I need a little help. You willing to help me?
You also talk in the book about the importance of chutzpah, the Yiddish word for supreme self-confidence. And I'm wondering how you advise people to thread the needle between confidence and arrogance.
Well, there is like carbs and calories. They're good and they're bad. There's good chutzpah and there's bad chutzpah. So I've kind of reframed it as good spa. And it's basically being confident, not arrogant. It's not being entitled. It's having a certain amount of confidence to go for something, to ask for something, but not believe you're entitled for it. You deserve it. And it's all stylistic. It's how you ask. It's not that you ask. It's the style in which you ask, the words you use, and how you go about it. I believe that it's the most important thing in a way of showing ambition, but not in a cocky way. So it's the good chutzpah as opposed to the arrogant, entitled, obnoxious chutzpah.
But you also talk about, I mean, not everyone's born with chutzpah. Some people are born with too much chutzpah. For those who aren't born with it, how is chutzpah learned?
That's a good question. It's basically, again, it's using your voice. It's basically having enough belief in yourself that not that you're so deserving for something that you want to go after something. If you sit and wait for things to come to you, if you just are assuming somebody's going to think you're ready for a promotion or another job or anything in your life, and you wait for them to tap you on your shoulder and say, I know you're ready. Come on. That's never going to happen. It's basically the style in which you go into your boss and say, you know, I think I'm ready for a promotion. I'd love to talk to you about what do I need to get to the next step, as opposed to, I've been here for 18 months and I should be getting that job. Why that other person get it? It's the style in which you ask for anything, being it a raise, a promotion, a reservation. There, for example, you go and you hear, whether you go online or you make a call. I'm big on making calls. I don't like going online, making, reservation. You're always going to get the places sold out. When you finally get somebody on the phone, there's a difference between saying, I know you always have empty tables for somebody, so I know you can fit us in there, as opposed to, I have a good friend who's in town. They're rarely here. Your restaurant is wonderful. I love it to pieces. Is there any way you can get us in? I don't care if it's 6:30, 7:30, any way you can push us in. We really appreciate it. Guess who's going to get that reservation? And I would say,
you catch more flies with honey than vinegar, right?
That's exactly right. And that goes back to my uncommon common sense. That's all it is. It's common sense that somehow we've all forgotten about.
You've often heard the mantra, and I've often heard the mantra, that you need to fail to succeed. And was curious, in your career trajectory, how has failure helped you? Are there any particular points of failure that, you can pinpoint now looking back at your career and you're like, I needed that to happen as much as that moment sucked for me? What you learned from that experience?
It's an overused term, and I don't really use the term in the book because it's been so overused, but I do believe in it, that everyone's going to fail. If anybody thinks they're not going to trip along the way, they're nuts. So you have to learn how to fail forward, meaning every time you trip, every time you scrape your knee, just learn from it and don't make that mistake a second time. There have been so many times I've tripped up in my career that have been really learning experiences and figured out a way to use it. One, it was a marketing event. We did a show called Political Animals. And we were so sure it was going to be a breakout hit. It had Sigourney Weaver. It had a great producer, directors, writers. Everything about it was fabulous. And when we got the ratings the next morning, we were so sure it was going to be the highest rated show we ever had. It was the lowest rated show we ever had. And we had to really analyze to find out what happened. We had stars, we had writers, we had directors. And it was a real learning experience for me because first, I had a brand new boss. I think Steve was there for maybe 6 months. Regimes had changed. He sold to Comcast. I had to send him a note early in the morning. This is our first new show out under a new regime, and basically say we screwed up. And I was very honest. I said, okay, lowest ratings we've ever had. Have no clue really what happened yet. We will dive into it, but I just wanted you to hear it from me before you heard it from the world. And it's the style in which you fail, how you own the failure, and how you learn from what you did not to make the same mistake. What we learned was it was too dark for USA at the time. People were sick of politics at that moment. It was also a little bit of an echo during a time where Hillary was starting her campaign. So there was too much going on in the real world. Nobody wanted to watch a show that had political in the title. It was called Political Animals. We learned. But again, it's not, believe me, you're never going to fail. You are, own it, accept it, and admit it. And whoever you have to basically tell, just be honest about it. And as a leader, never blame it on anybody else. Never blame it on your marketing department, your press department, your director, whatever it is. If you're a leader, you have to own it and own it exclusively and then move on. It's the only way to lead and be respected.
One other chapter that struck me is about not sweating the small stuff. The advice not to sweat the small stuff. You say leaders are the ones who take the small stuff seriously. And again, the question there is a question of balance, because if you get too obsessed over the small stuff, you miss the big picture. But you say sometimes if you only focus on the big picture, you're missing the details. And so, in all of these mantras that you challenge, it seems like there's a middle ground to be found there.
Yeah, but I think I had to go extreme to get to the middle ground of what it is. But I think, again, we've been brought up to believe that it's the big picture that counts, the overall success that counts. When in my mind, if you don't sweat the small stuff, you're never going to do the big stuff. It's all about details. As they say, God and the devil are in the details. And I'm a big believer in the small things in life add up to your success in anything you do. You hand in a proposal to your boss and there are a couple of commas missing and a typo here or there. That's small stuff, but it's going to instantly tell your boss whether you're efficient, whether you have an eye for details, whether you're going to double and triple check everything you do. You think about small stuff for a chef, 2 teaspoons versus 2 tablespoons of salt, big difference. On a set, a perfectly placed prop can make or break a scene, or an expression on an actor can make or break a character. It is the small stuff that makes a huge difference in virtually everything you do. And I believe, when somebody works on something for me, and since my early days of leadership, I actually looked and judged them by the detail of what they did. Would I trust them with bigger projects, bigger things, because they treated the little things they did very well? The other thing that people forget about is the small stuff in life, the thank yous, the remembering birthdays, personalizing notes rather than sending generic notes of a thank you, etc. That's the small stuff that sets you apart, that makes people remember, oh, she really did her homework. She knows who I am. That was a sweet note, as opposed to, thank you very much. I really enjoyed our lunch. Hope to keep in touch. So again, it sounds silly, but those small little details that personalize things just make you resonate.
When I was at CBS, we started a series called Note to Self. I don't know if you've ever caught any of them, where we bring in, and it was everyone from like Oprah to Danica Patrick to Obama, where they wrote a note to their younger selves. They picked a point in their childhood or a younger version of themselves and sent them basically a pep talk, a note saying, this stuff's going to happen to you. Like, persevere. Don't mean to put you on a spot, Bonnie, but curious if you had to write a note to your, you've done this book now, and if you were talking to a younger version of yourself, what advice would you give yourself? And I think it probably applies to most young people making their way into business these days, or any business, frankly.
There are a couple of things. One is when you're younger, to enjoy the journey a little bit more, not to take everything so seriously, judge yourself and judge others, because you miss out on what's in front of you. You miss out on really experiencing, enjoying every moment of it, because you're always looking ahead. What's my next job? What's my next gig? Or looking behind, oh, I blew something, etc. So it's really embracing and enjoying the journey and understanding that even the hardest parts of it will somehow lead to something else, as opposed to the worrying that we all do when we're younger about perception, about are we succeeding, are we failing, or what do I have to do next? Where do I have to go next? It's really enjoying it, because when I look back, I feel like I'm very, very lucky. But there are points in my life I wish I just basked in it a tiny bit more, rather than looking to the next gig or the next friend or the next whatever as quickly as we tend to do. You do realize that, and it's a horrible, over cliched term, but life does go very, very quickly. And the older you get, you realize how much more quickly it goes. So just enjoy it. Even the fuck ups, even those things that feel so uncomfortable at the moment, take a breath, realize you screwed up, understand what it is, learn from it, and move on. And the other is appreciate the people all around you, your colleagues, because they come back into your life somewhere, somehow, all along that journey as well. I've been really, really lucky that I have friends, good friends, that go back to my earliest days. And even with all of those people still, on my speed call list, I wish there were still others that somehow I let slip and slide. Those people are important in terms of your big picture in your life.
Wise words. Bonnie, you have a best-selling book on your hands, which means we live in an era of sequels. They're going to come back to you for 15 more lies at some point.
All right. Well, you seem to have a good collection of your own. Send them to me and we can do it together.
I'm all about a collaboration. We were talking just before we hit record here that TV is very much a team sport, and you were talking about one of the lessons of being an author. You found out that you were doing it solo.
Oh, my goodness. Mo, I will tell you, writing a book is a sobering experience. I have a complete new respect for anybody that's a writer, no less a published one. Our world in terms of media are teams, which I love, and I wouldn't give up for anything. It's collaborative. It's tons of people doing tons of things, celebrating together, crying together. When you do a book, you are out there on your own, and it is scary.
Bonnie, I appreciate the conversation. Wise words. Recommend this to everybody. 15 Lies Women Are Told at Work.
Been a pleasure.
Thanks.
Love talking with you.